If you have been following my channel, I have been bringing real-world examples to try and teach you Next.js, React.js, MongoDB, and Material UI. Today we're going to add a functionality to the user's profile page where an administrator can ban a user, and after they have banned the user, they can simply click and unban the user. This button, when clicked, updates the MongoDB database. It makes an API call using Next.js. It uses Material UI for the button and the snack bar that you see here. And it uses React.js for other functionalities. So let's get started. In my previous video, I explained how Next.js has a pages directory, and every folder inside the pages directory becomes a part of the URL. Let me explain. So in this example on delete.com, I have the site running on localhost port 3000, and you can see a /user here. This /user is nothing but a part of the folder which is under the pages directory. So user, which is a folder under pages, becomes a part of the URL. And you can see after the user, there is a user ID in the URL. Next.js knows that it can look for this user ID in brackets and consider that as the user ID. Now this is a syntax that Next.js uses. You can have a post ID, a blog ID, or anything here, and if you put that in brackets, Next.js will fetch it from the part of the URL that follows the folder. Let's head into the index.jsx file that I have already built here, and I'm going to go over every part of this code to help you understand how this was built. Everything that you see at the top are nothing but imports, so it is importing a lot of components from Material UI. For example, button, container, paper. These are all components that come with Material UI. It also imports features from React. For example, useState is imported from React, and I'm going to show you in a minute how that's used. The entry point of this index.jsx would be the default function. In this case, it is on line 51. It says export default function user page. But you can see here the user page is already accepting data, and it's called user. This is a great feature with Next.js. What's happening here is Next.js has the ability to get the data of the user from the server, which means prior to the page actually loading in the browser, it would have already done the work and fetched all the user data. Now that's going to make the page much faster. So let's see how it's done. As I scroll down, the bottom of the page has something called export function get server side props. Now get server side props comes with Next.js, and let's see what we're doing here. For simplicity, if you can just understand that db await get MongoDB just means it is connecting to the database, to the MongoDB database. Once it connects to the MongoDB database, we're saying fetch the user from the database. Now the get user is a function. We don't have to go through the function today, but basically it is just fetching the data from the user's collection. So let's see how it is prefetching data and feeding into this page. The important part here is the user ID that's being passed to the get user function comes from context.params.userid. Do you remember this user ID? That is the same name that you had given to the folder here. So that is how it knows to pick whatever was in the URL, consider it as the user ID, and then pass it as the params and give it to the database function. That is how we can prefetch data. Now this happens on the server side, which means the browser has nothing to do with this. When the page is ready to load, it already has that data. Isn't that an amazing feature? That makes the page much faster. To add the ability to ban a user, we should look at the placement of the ban button. I think the best place to add a feature to ban this user would be to add a button next to these buttons here. Now there is a couple of options here. One, there's a message button where people can message another user and they can report something about this user. Let's look at where this message and report user is in our code. Heading back to the index.jsx file, and if I scroll down, there is the return statement, and it says valued member since, so it should be right under that somewhere. There they are. So it has a box which is a Material UI component, and MY of 3 means that there's a margin of 3 above and below this. And there are two buttons, button for the message and button for the report user. I'm gonna simply make a copy of this button here and call it ban user. For now, we are not changing the function, it's just called report this user. Let's see how that looks. So there's the ban user, but the icon is still a flag. Let's head over to materialui.com and search for some icons. So Material UI icons are here. We should be able to find an icon to block a user or ban a user. So I'm going to use this block icon. We can simply click this to copy it. Heading back to our code, we can go all the way to where all the icons are, and we can add it anywhere. I'm just going to add it under the flag icon, and there's our block icon. If we scroll back to where we added the ban user, I can now simply replace flag to block icon. We have message, report, and ban user. We need some space in between these icons, so I'm going to introduce another component called stack. The syntax of stack is stack and then items go under it. I simply copied all this code and put it in here. We can put all these buttons in the stack now. I think it would look good if we place some dividers between those icons, and I saw an example has dividers. I'm going to copy this and put it next to a stack, and let's save this and see what that looks like. It says stack is not defined. That's because we never imported stack. So let's import stack and put it all the way at the top, maybe next to grid, it doesn't matter. And now let's scroll back and see divider is not defined. So we need to define divider as well. What this did is it stacked on top of each other, so we need to fix the direction of the stack. Direction equal to row might fix this. Now the icons are next to each other and have a divider, but I would like this centered. So to do that, we need to place a grid. Justify content equals center. And let's put all of this inside the grid. We also have to make this a container, and that would center all these icons. The ban user button still calls report this user function. We should probably change that to something like handle user ban. This button will now look for the handle user ban function. Let's go ahead and create it. Above report this user, I'm just going to create an empty function here and call it handle user ban. React has something called state, which is very useful. I will explain that in a minute. Let's add a new state called user banned. User banned can be modified using set user banned. I made up both of these. User banned is a variable I made up, and I'm going to set user banned with a function called set user banned. Initially, the state is gonna be false because initially the user is not banned for now. Eventually, we're going to set this value using a value from the database. If the user was already banned, this is going to be true. If the user was not banned, this is going to be false. For now, we're going to hard code it as false. Let me fix the typo here. So we have added a new state called user banned, and we're going to set it using set user banned. And let's see how we can use that. In our handle user banned function, what we're going to do is we're going to set user banned as not user banned. So it'll simply set the opposite of what user banned has right now. So initially user banned was false, and when this function is called for the first time, it's going to set it as true. When the user clicks on it again, it's going to set it as false. Let's display what's going on using this snack bar, which is also something that Material UI provides. And I'm going to change this to info. I'm setting a message here that will display if the user was banned or unbanned. If we click the ban user button now, it'll say you have banned this user. When I click it again, it'll say you have unbanned this user. So that is a simple function that will ban and unban the user and display the message on the screen. But this does not write anything to the database. I have opened MongoDB Compass. This is where we can take a look at what is happening to this user's banned field. Our goal will be to use the function that we just wrote and update this database and this field as false or true depending on what is passed using the API. So this is where we're going to create an API that will talk to the database. I'm going to go ahead and add some code to update the database. To update the database, we need to pass something to the API. So before we do that, let's build the body of the request. The body of the request will have the ID of the user to be banned and the status if it's going to be true or false. Once we have the body of the request ready, we can now write our API. So this API is going to have a path of API user ban, and it's going to be a put request, which means it's going to update the user's collection, and the body is going to be passed as JSON. Now the problem is we don't have this API user ban folder yet. Let's go ahead and create it. Under the pages API user directory, let's go ahead and create a folder called ban. Inside the ban directory, I'm going to create a new file called index.js. I did not want you to sit there and watch me type, so I went ahead and built this index.js file under the ban folder. So what this does is it once again accepts the connection to the database, and we're protecting it using a request.user, and if it's not user, it would send an unauthenticated message. And this comes from the body. The user ID and the ban status comes from the body of the request, which is here, the user ID and the ban status. And then we are fetching the users collection. So db.collection.users collection in MongoDB. We are filtering the ID by the user ID that was passed, and we are setting the ban status to ban status. Heading back to the index.jsx file in the front end, we are requesting the API to update the status. I went ahead and completed this part of the code, which basically is just checking for the status that we received from our API request. Once the API request was successful, it's going to pass a status of 200. We are checking if it's 200, and if it was successful, we are setting the message if the user was banned or unbanned. The set open snack is going to display that little snack bar that appeared at the bottom, and we are setting the user ban status to the opposite of what it is right now. And if the request was not successful, we're just going to display an error and say something went wrong. Hopefully this never happens. Let's test this out and see what happens to our database. If we look at the database for the user, currently it says ban false. Let's see this in action. If I click ban user, it says you have banned this user. And if we check the database now, it says banned true. Let's close this snack bar. Right now the user is banned. As you can see, it's true here. When we refresh, it is still gonna say banned. We don't want this to say ban user if the user is already banned. So we need to handle this behavior where if the user is already banned, it should say unban user. So let's go ahead and fix that. We have the status of user banned, which we are setting initially to false. We should actually set this from the value that was passed from the database. So from the database we're getting ID, name. We're not using bio, so maybe we can replace that with banned. So as you can see, ID, name, banned, profile picture all comes from user, which we prefetched, and banned should have the value of true or false from the database now. And down here where it says ban user, we can make this a variable. If the user was not banned, it would say ban user, or else it's going to say unban user. As simple as that, using a ternary operator. Let's see this in action. Right now in the database it says banned true, so the admin should have the option to unban the user. So that works as expected. Let's click this. So when we click this, it became ban user, and it says you have unbanned this user. Let's look at the database now. It says banned false. We click on ban user, and it says you have banned this user. The admin has the option to unban the user now. And if we look at the database, it says banned true. So that works as expected. We added a button that's used to ban and unban the user, and the user's profile field is updated. Let's go ahead and add some colors to this ban unban feature. So the icon here, I'm going to change this to red when the user is banned. So block icon, I can change the color to a variable field. So instead of just being the default color, if the user was not banned, it would be a normal color, which should be secondary. And if the user was banned, the color could be error. So right now the user is banned, so the color is red. And if we say unban, it's going to remove the red color. Ban the user, and it becomes red. And when we refresh the page, it gives the user the ability to ban. So admin can ban the user. And now banned is true, so this should remain red when we refresh the page. So there it is. So now it is getting the value from the database, and we are able to update it using the Next.js API. When I started the video, I said give the administrator or the moderator the ability to ban a user. We have not checked if the visitor is an admin or a moderator. Right now, everyone who visits this profile has the ability to ban and unban the user. We do not want that. So I have a couple of fields here. They're called visitor is admin or visitor is mod. So we can write an if statement to check if the visitor is an admin or a mod, and give them the ability to update the database. Putting an if statement checking if the visitor is admin or a moderator will take care of this function here, but ideally we would not even want to show this function, this button, to any visitor. We want to show this only to an administrator or a moderator. So let's go ahead and update the code to do that. Scrolling down to where those buttons were, we put the entire button under grids here. We can write a quick check around this button, visitor is admin or visitor is mod, and in bracket we can put this button. So now we put this button inside an admin or a mod check, and I took the admin privileges from the test user, and now if I go back to the page, those buttons are missing. So let's do a quick recap. In Next.js, we have the pages directory. Under the pages directory, we have the users directory, and inside that, we have the user ID directory, which fetches the user's profile. Our index.jsx file was modified. We added a new button, and the button was only visible to admins or moderators. And the button, when clicked, calls a handle ban function. The handle ban function is also protected and can only be operated by visitors who are administrators or moderators. We are building the body of the request that we are about to send to the API. The body will contain the ID of the user, and the status is going to be the opposite of the current user ban status. We are sending a request to the API. It is a put request, and it's going to API user ban. And if we visit API user ban index.js, we are making a request to the database, updating the users collection, filtering by the ID of the user that was passed in the body. So as you can see, user ID and ban status was a part of the body, and we're filtering the users and setting the status of the banned field. The status that goes back to the front end would be a 200 if it was a successful request, and upon success we are displaying a message through the snack bar if the user was banned or unbanned. We're also setting the state of the banned field to the opposite of what it is right now, which will update the state that we had initially defined here. The initial state would be fetched from the database here because it comes from the user's profile field. So that, my friends, was a quick feature that we added to a live website. I'm going to make some more improvements to the code and protect it even more. But that's how we go about making changes to the front end like we did here. Next time we're going to add additional features to websites such as these, and in the process learn more about Next.js, React.js, MongoDB, and Material UI. I'll be back with more videos with live examples and tutorials on how you can create websites. It's going to be a slow learning process, so don't get discouraged. I encourage you to watch various videos. It doesn't have to be a full end-to-end video of an entire site being built. That might overwhelm you. So videos such as these that tackle short functionalities one at a time will be less boring, hopefully, and you will be able to learn snippets of code and functionality every evening or every day. If you enjoyed this video and if it was useful, please give me a thumbs up. Thanks. Until next time, take care.